My name is Celeste Morgan. I'm 28. 3 days from my thesis deadline. No champagne, no family cheers. Just me, alone in a cold attic apartment in Pittsburgh, eating instant noodles from a chipped mug, because even my last clean bowl broke. I was tired of being broke, of being invisible, of cleaning up everyone's mess while no one noticed mine. But I was proud. I'd made it this far. No shortcuts, no trust funds. Just 73 pages of research. Living on one dying laptop with a flickering screen and a dented corner. And then, Jace kicked the door open. Before I take you further, before I tell you how one night turned a cracked screen into a courtroom case, do me one thing. Hit subscribe. And in the comments, tell me where you're watching from. Because maybe you've been here too. The night my thesis died wasn't when I broke. It was when they laughed. I sat cross-legged on the floor of my attic apartment, the glow of my aging laptop screen painting my walls in pale blue. Pittsburgh nights in April carried that stubborn, wet chill that even the thickest socks couldn't fix. 3 days left until my thesis deadline. 3 days until I could breathe. The cursor blinked on the final paragraph of Chapter 4. My caffeine-shaky fingers hovered just above the keyboard. Then the door slammed open. Jace didn't knock. He never did. "Drive me to Miles's place," he barked, already halfway inside, tossing on his varsity jacket like it was some kind of crown. The familiar mix of cheap cologne and entitlement filled the air. I didn't look up. "No, Jace. I've got work to finish." Silence. Then a scoff. "God, you're so self-important. You think being in school makes you better than everyone else?" I kept my eyes on the screen. Arguing with him had never worked. Growing up, I'd learned it was better to stay small. Invisible. Let him burn himself out. He stood there for a beat longer, breathing loud like a warning. Then the door slammed again. I thought that was it. It wasn't. Less than 5 minutes later, something cracked through the air like a bone snapping. Sharp. Sudden. I ran to the living room. My laptop lay face down on the hardwood floor. The screen split wide open like a wound. The keyboard dangled by one wire. The machine that had carried every citation, every data set, every sleepless night of research, destroyed in a single careless act. And there he stood. Jace. Arms crossed, mouth curled into that smug half-smile I'd come to hate. "Oops," he said, not even bothering to fake remorse. "Guess it slipped." My breath caught. Not from shock. No, I'd seen worse from him over the years. But this was different. This wasn't an accident. This was targeted. Intentional. Precise. I opened my mouth, but before I could speak, I heard it. A laugh. From the kitchen. I turned just in time to see my mother raising a glass of Chardonnay, her eyes still on her phone as if this moment wasn't even worth a glance. "It's just a laptop, Celeste. God, you're so dramatic." And then my father, leaning against the counter, coffee mug in hand, smiling like this was some kind of sitcom moment. "Should have printed it out like we used to," he said, shaking his head in mock disapproval. I stood there, tears already stinging behind my eyes, waiting for one of them to realize what had just happened. Waiting for someone to ask if I was okay. They didn't. Because to them, Jace was just being Jace. And me? I was always too sensitive. "He's just impulsive," Mom had said 1,000 times before. Still figuring things out. "He didn't mean it," Dad would add, like that erased the consequences. But this time, he meant it. He looked me in the eye and destroyed the one thing I had left. I didn't yell, didn't scream, didn't even curse. I just walked back to my room, shut the door behind me, and sat there in the dark. The screen flickered behind my eyelids even after I closed them. The weight of years settled into my chest like wet cement. This wasn't just about a broken laptop. This was about every holiday I spent doing dishes while Jace got praised for not starting a fight. Every family dinner where my accomplishments were a side note to his drama. Every single time I swallowed my anger just to keep the peace. A faint memory pushed its way forward. Me, at 8 years old, standing outside the Aspen Circle front gate, locked out while everyone else laughed inside. They laughed then, too. I wiped my face with the sleeve of my sweatshirt, stood, and walked to the fridge. There, pinned beneath a takeout menu and an overdue utility bill, was an old, faded photo from that summer. I stared at it for a long time. Next time, I won't just stand here. They broke my laptop. They thought that was the end. It wasn't even the beginning. The plastic piece from the hinge sat cold and sharp in my palm. I slipped it into the pocket of my jacket like a talisman. Something small and broken. Like me, but still here. By the time I dragged myself to campus the next morning, my eyes burned from lack of sleep. The university library doors creaked as I pushed them open, and the stale mix of old paper and dust settled heavy in my lungs. I headed straight to the public computer lab, heart pounding like I was preparing for battle. At 10 a.m., I knocked on Dr. Henley's office door. He glanced up, his reading glasses perched low on his nose. "Ms. Morgan," he said, already expecting me. I held up my phone with photos of the splintered laptop, my voice trembling but steady. "I need an extension. 1 week, just 7 days." He didn't ask why my family hadn't helped. Didn't ask if I had a backup. He just stared at the images for a long moment and then said, "You have 1 week. Make it count." For the next 4 days, I lived in the library. I charged my borrowed university laptop in 20-minute shifts, bouncing between outlets near the vending machines and a forgotten corner behind the sociology shelves. I slept in the reading nook, curled up with my coat as a blanket, feet sticking off the edge of a chair that wasn't made for sleep. Between retyping chapters from memory and recreating data tables by hand, I noticed something else. My bank balance didn't make sense. I hadn't spent that much. A few groceries, bus fare. But when I opened the app, my stomach twisted. $342, less than I should have had. Scrolling further, my eyes locked on a name that froze the blood in my veins. Coleraine Financial Services. A payment posted just 2 days ago. I didn't have an account with them. Clicking through my email, I searched for Coleraine. An auto reply popped up from 6 months earlier. "Thank you for choosing Coleraine Student Flexline." Flexline? I didn't apply for that. I knew I hadn't. My chest tightened as I opened the attached PDF. My name, my social security number, my email. But not my signature. It looked like mine, close enough to fool anyone, but I knew better. Whoever signed it hadn't noticed I stopped dotting my I's after sophomore year. My hands shook as I took a screenshot. Then another. And another. I created a new folder on my USB drive, titled it archive_personal. For the next 2 hours, I combed through old emails, banking statements, even text alerts I'd ignored at the time. The more I dug, the worse it got. Charges I didn't remember. Approvals I never made. Names of apps I'd never downloaded. Every few minutes, I'd pause, staring at the screen, wondering, do I really want to open this door? The answer kept coming back. Yes. Because for once, this wasn't just Jace being Jace. This was criminal. By Friday afternoon, I sat across from Nora Park at the campus legal clinic. Third-year law student. Blunt. Efficient. Zero tolerance for nonsense. I slid the flash drive across the desk, my throat dry. "I don't know if this counts as anything, but I thought you should see." She plugged it in, scrolled through the screenshots, her face unreadable. 10 minutes passed in silence, save for the occasional click of her mouse. Then she leaned back, folded her hands, and looked me dead in the eye. "You know this is criminal, right?" The words hit me harder than I expected. I stared at her, then down at the plastic laptop hinge still hidden in my jacket pocket. I walked out of the clinic, my heart pounding in a way that felt both terrifying and necessary. Downstairs, I found an empty computer terminal in the basement lab. The air smelled like stale coffee and overheated circuits. I opened a blank Google Doc, paused, then typed, "Subject? Formal identity fraud complaint." They said keeping the peace was more important than making things right. I disagreed. The pen felt heavier than it should as I signed my name on the complaint form at the campus legal office. Nora stood beside me, flipping through a thick stack of supporting documents like this was just another Thursday. For her, maybe it was. For me, it felt like lighting a match in a room soaked with gasoline. The moment my signature dried, I felt it. The first crack in whatever dam I'd been holding back all these years. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed with a notification from Coleraine Financial Services. "We have opened an internal investigation into the reported identity fraud." I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the screen until the words blurred. Then the family group chat exploded. First, a string of crying emojis from my mother, followed by a long text. "Celeste, please don't do this. It's tearing the family apart." As if I hadn't already been torn. Then came Dad, typing in all caps like he always did when he was angry. "We could have handled this privately." Jace sent a voice memo. 32 seconds of him blaming me, saying I'd blown everything out of proportion, that he'd always been there for me, that I was just bitter. I didn't press play on the second one. I muted the chat. Then I blocked the number. I closed the messaging app and stared at my cracked phone screen, suddenly remembering a summer day at Aspen Circle, back in 10th grade. Dad sitting on the back porch, drinking coffee, while I cried on the other side of the screen door. The words were the same then. "Your brother's under pressure. Be the mature one." Funny how they never worried about tearing the family apart when it was me they were breaking. That night, the knock on my apartment door came just after 9 p.m. I opened it to find both my parents standing there, looking like they'd driven straight from some suburban drama series. Dad in a rumpled jacket, Mom still wearing her work heels but with mascara streaked from crying. "We need to talk," Dad said. I stepped outside, pulling the door closed behind me. For a long second, none of us spoke. The hallway air was thick, the flickering overhead light buzzing just enough to set my teeth on edge. My mom's voice cracked first. "Celeste? Honey, please. You don't have to go through with this." I folded my arms across my chest. "This isn't just about me." Dad's tone dropped, low and warning. "You're making this public. Do you realize what that means for Jace? For us?" I met his stare without blinking. "I'm done paying the silence tax." The words hung there, heavier than I intended, but exactly what I meant. Neither of them answered. Dad's jaw tensed. Mom reached for me, but I stepped back. They left without another word. Back inside, I sat on the floor by the door, heart racing but steadier than I expected. I opened my email. There it was, staring at me like a new chapter I hadn't planned to write. Subject line: Court summons, Allegheny County, Morgan versus Morgan, initial hearing date, May 10th, 2023, they thought I'd fold. Instead, I filed. I sat in the waiting area outside courtroom 2B, fingers curled tight around the small, jagged piece of plastic from my old laptop. It sat in my pocket like armor. A reminder. This is why. Nora sat beside me, flipping through our file, her pen moving in quick, practice strokes across a legal pad. Her composure made me feel steadier than I had any right to be. When the bailiff finally opened the doors, my heart jumped. The courtroom felt colder than I expected. Off-white walls, scuffed wood panels, and rows of chairs that seemed to lean just slightly with age. Jace sat at the defendant's table, slouched low, drowning in a jacket 2 sizes too big. Like fabric could hide what he'd done. Our parents sat behind him, Mom already dabbing her eyes with a tissue, as though she was the one on trial. Dad stared straight ahead, jaw locked tight, his arms folded the same way they'd been that night in our kitchen. The judge entered, a woman in her late 50s with silver-streaked hair and eyes that didn't miss a thing. The clerk called the case, Morgan versus Morgan, identity misrepresentation and unauthorized use of credit instruments. The title alone made the air thinner. Nora stood first, handing over our file. Your Honor, we've submitted documentation of the forged student loan application, financial statements showing unauthorized transactions, screenshots of communication logs, and expert analysis confirming the signature discrepancies. My throat tightened as I took my place at the witness stand. I recited the timeline: the discovery of the loan, the forged email address, the payments I never made. I listed the nights spent at the library, rebuilding my thesis while fighting off collection calls. When I finished, I slid a printed page across the table. Side-by-side samples of my real signature and the forgery. The judge studied it silently. Then it was Jace's turn. He stood but didn't really straighten. Shifted his weight from foot to foot like the floor burned beneath him. "I didn't mean to cause problems," he said, voice rough and lazy. "It was just temporary. I was going to pay it back. I just needed help." He didn't look at me. "She always makes a big deal out of stuff," he added, eyes darting toward the judge. "She's dramatic." There it was again. Dramatic. My nails dug into my palm, but I stayed still. The judge leaned forward, her tone flat but slicing. "Do you acknowledge that you submitted the loan application using your sister's name and social security number?" Jace hesitated, shoulders twitching. "I mean, yeah, but it was for school stuff. It's all family, you know?" The judge's gaze didn't soften. "Forgery is not a family matter. It's a legal one." Mom let out a muffled sob behind him. Dad stayed stone silent. I kept my eyes on the desk, letting the judge's words settle the way I wished my parents' support had. When the verdict came, it landed like steel. The court finds the defendant guilty of identity fraud and financial misrepresentation. Restitution in the amount of $7,500 will be paid to Ms. Celeste Morgan. The gavel dropped. The sound rang through the room like a final nail in a too-long coffin. On the way out, I passed my parents in the aisle. I paused just long enough to say, low and even, "The day you laughed, this started writing itself." Outside, the Pittsburgh air felt lighter than it had in weeks. As I pulled out my phone, a new email notification appeared at the top of the screen. Subject: Aspen Circle Retreat. Appointment confirmation body. Your appointment as program director is confirmed. I stood there on the courthouse steps, staring at the screen, and for the first time in months, I smiled. First they laughed. Now they're asking for a reservation. The subject line blinked at the top of my inbox like some kind of cosmic joke. Morgan Family Reunion. Aspen Circle Inquiry. For a full 30 seconds, I just stared at it. The sender, Deborah Morgan. My mother. The tone, sugary, overly cheerful, like years of courtrooms, silence, and fractured phone calls had never happened. "We would love to reserve Aspen Circle for our annual family gathering," she wrote. "We've hosted there many times before and would love to continue the tradition. Please let us know availability and rates." I leaned back in my chair, staring out the office window as the late July sun stretched long shadows across the gravel driveway. Funny how they never worried about tearing the family apart when it was me they were breaking. The memory from 2016 landed like a stone at the bottom of my stomach. That summer, I'd gotten a text from Mom. Next time, maybe. The year they'd left me off the guest list for the family reunion. The year I sat on the bus back to Pittsburgh, scrolling through photos of them laughing on the Aspen Circle lawn without me. Now they wanted back in. I scrolled down and opened the retreat's policy document. The words were mine. Every line, every rule about guest conduct and booking eligibility had been written by me, signed off by the board 3 months ago. I clicked edit. Then, typing slow and deliberate, I added a new clause. Effective immediately, Aspen Circle reserves the right to decline reservation requests from groups with a documented history of financial misconduct, identity fraud, or patterns of abusive behavior toward former or current staff. I didn't add names. Didn't need to. After double-checking for legal clarity, I hit save. My assistant peeked her head in from the front desk. "Hey, we've got a response ready for the Morgans. Want me to send?" I nodded. "Use the standard template. No personalization. Within minutes, the rejection email was gone. Signed simply, Aspen Circle Administration Team. The rest of the day passed in slow, quiet beats. I reviewed vendor contracts, updated our summer programming schedule, and finalized logistics for an upcoming leadership retreat. By 4 p.m., my phone buzzed. Missed call, Richard Morgan. Then again an hour later. Then a text. Is this really your place? I didn't answer. By sunset, I stood near the main house entrance as the late light stretched gold across the gravel lot. That's when I saw it. Their car, dark blue, same license plate I'd memorized years ago. They pulled up just far enough to see through the open gate, but didn't get out at first. I stood there, clipboard in hand, retreat staff shirt tucked neatly into black slacks, watching. Finally, they stepped out. My father scanned the property like it was unfamiliar. My mother clutched her purse tight, her gaze jumping from the garden path to the main house windows, as if looking for someone she knew. She wouldn't find them. I stayed where I was, saying nothing. After a long minute, they got back in the car. That night, as I locked the office door, my phone lit up again. One final text from Richard. We didn't know. I stared at it for a beat, then let out the smallest, coldest smile. You did. For years, I waited outside their gates. Now I close mine. Spring came late to the mountains that year. Aspen Circle hummed with life. Conference banners fluttering near the main lodge, rows of folding chairs neatly arranged on the lawn, coffee stations already steaming by 7 a.m. The air smelled like pine and fresh beginnings. I stood at the side entrance, clipboard in hand, checking last-minute logistics for our corporate leadership summit. The staff moved around me like clockwork. Event coordinators, tech crews, catering teams, all of them calling me Director Morgan without hesitation. The title still felt new, but it fit. The first guest buses were pulling into the lower lot when I caught a flicker of movement at the far end of the property. Two figures stood just outside the gate. My heart didn't race. Not this time. I walked toward the main house steps, slow and deliberate. From this angle, I could see them clearly. My mother, holding her purse like it was a shield, and my father, standing stiff and tired beside her. They weren't dressed for a retreat. No name badges, no RSVP. Just two people on the outside looking in. The same rusted latch on the gate hung loose, unchanged since the last Morgan family reunion nearly 8 years ago. I didn't move to open it. My mother took a hesitant step forward, her voice barely carrying across the gravel. Please, don't shut us out. The words felt like an echo from a life I no longer belonged to. I adjusted the clipboard against my hip. There's a nice public park 2 towns over, I said quietly. You'll find it less intimidating. Her mouth opened like she wanted to argue. My father just lowered his gaze to the ground. Without waiting for a response, I turned and walked back toward the conference tent. The PA system crackled to life as I climbed the small podium. A sea of unfamiliar faces looked up at me. Executives, analysts, entrepreneurs, people who didn't know my history, didn't care about family dynamics or courtroom verdicts or broken laptops. They just waited for me to speak. I adjusted the mic. Good morning, I began, steady and clear, and welcome to Aspen Circle. I paused, letting the words settle. My name is Celeste Morgan, and this is mine. Applause rippled through the crowd, but I didn't linger on it. I stepped back from the mic, letting the energy of the room carry forward. Scanning the audience, I caught one final glance toward the main gate. Empty now. For the first time in years, I felt it. Not revenge, not bitterness. Just peace. And that was enough. The echoes of their laughter had once marked her breaking point, but now it stood as a footnote to her triumph. Celeste didn't just reclaim her name or her credit. She reclaimed the right to define her own story. Because when injustice meets quiet, relentless resolve, the final verdict doesn't just settle accounts. It rewrites legacies. Like the slow swing of a long-closed gate, some victories don't need applause. They need closure. And this time it stayed shut for all the right reasons.